All right, we're going to start exercise 3-1. And if you're in my class at Buffalo State, you can see the chapter 3 content folder. Your starter files are actually what you completed from chapter 2. So your 2-1, we're going to make a copy of that folder. So go ahead and find the projects folder where you save your projects for Visual Studio. I have this Visual Studio 2015 folder, although we're not using 2015. And I've got exercise 2-1 here. Couple ways you can make a copy of this folder. The easiest way is to click it once and then hit Control-C, Control-V. And that's going to make a copy of the folder. And then hit F2, and I want to rename this to exercise 3-1. So we took the folder, Control-C for copy, Control-V for paste. We got a copy of the folder, we hit F2, and we rename it to your last name, exercise 3-1. Double click on that. Now inside of this is the solution. It still says 2-1. That's okay. We're going to change that once we open it up. So let's go ahead, double click on the solution. And again, we're in the 3-1 folder. I open the solution in 2-1. And I'm just going to close that. Pretend that didn't happen. Okay, and while we're in here, let's rename these things. So I'm going to right click. I'll start with the solution. Right click on the solution, go to rename. This is exercise 3-1. And we're going to rename the project as well. Exercise 3-1. So if you notice, I just right click on the project or the solution in the Solution Explorer and go to rename. And then we're going to double click on invoice total. And we've already done steps 1 and 2. And we just started step 3 by opening the form invoice total. And then it wants us to double click on the calculate button. So when you're looking at the design view of a form, when you double click on an element, it'll drop you into a procedure in the code view. So if I double click on the calculate button, it's going to drop me into a procedure. This particular procedure handles whenever somebody clicks on the calculate button. And because that procedure did not exist before, it gives me an empty one that I'm going to be able to work in. And then step 3 says use the code in figure 3-7, which is on page 71. And you can, in this case, copy the code from the text, but please write it out because you'll learn as you write it out. So the first thing we need to do is declare a variable. I'm going to call this variable discount percent. And discount percent is a decimal. Now it's underlined in green because it's not being used anywhere. So it's just kind of giving you a warning that you've got this variable that it's not being used anywhere. That's useful if maybe you misspelled it, or you've taken out the use of a variable but you're still declaring it. You might as well get rid of it to save a little bit of memory. All right, and then we have a bunch of if and else if statements here. So if we wanted to, we can actually just insert a snippet. And a snippet will get you started with the code without having to write it all out. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to insert a snippet. So from here, I just right-clicked, snippet, insert snippet. I'm looking for a code pattern. Most of the time when you're inserting a snippet, that's what you're looking for. Double-click on that. This is a condition because it's an if, else condition. So look in conditional and loops. And then I'm going to scroll down. Here's if, else. That's close to what I want. And it gives me this snippet. So it kind of wrote this out for me, which is great. And our first condition is if text subtotal dot text is greater than or equal to 500, then we're going to say discount percent is equal to 0.2. So if the user enters anything that's greater than or equal to 500, the discount percentage is going to be 20%. else if text subtotal dot text, let's see, what are we on, is greater than or equal to 500, or not 500, 250, and text subtotal dot text is less than 500, then discount percent is equal to 0.15. Got to do that else if one more time. Else if text subtotal dot text is greater than or equal to 100 and text subtotal dot text is less than 250, then, and notice how this else if on line 10 right here is not indented properly. As soon as I hit enter, Visual Studio fixes that for me and sets the indentation properly. All right. Otherwise, in this case, the discount percent is 10%, so 0.1. Else, the discount percent is equal to 0. So this section of code is looking at what the user inputted into the subtotal. If it's greater than 500, they get a 20% discount. If it's between 250 and 500, it's 15% discount. If it's between 100 and 250, it's 10%. And basically, if it's less than 100, they don't get a discount at all. Now we need another variable for discount amount, and it's also a decimal. And this particular variable, we're going to set the value of it as we declare it. And discount amount is going to be equal to what the user entered as the subtotal times the discount percent that we just figured out above. And we need one more. We want the invoice total, and that's also a decimal, and that's going to be equal to the subtotal the user entered minus the discount amount. All right. Now that we have, calculated what the discount percent should be, or we kind of looked it up in this condition here, then we calculated what the discount amount is and the invoice total. We want to put the percentage and the discount amount and the invoice total in these text boxes here. So we have text discount percent, and we're going to set the text property of that text box. It's going to be equal to, and we're going to use the format percent. Let's see if I find it here. Format percent, discount percent. All right, so we took discount percent, which if I click on that, you can see where it's been used everywhere. This is, where we're figuring out 20%, 15%, or whatnot. We're going to take that, format it as a percent, and if you hover over this, you can see that it takes in, let's see, it's a part of the string function. So what we're going to do is multiply it by 100 and add a trailing percent sign. So we'll see that work happen in a second. But 0.2 is going to come out as 20%. All right, and discount amount, we're going to use another function here. We're going to use format currency, and we're going to pass to it discount amount. Oh, and discount percent, we want one decimal place. That's what that comma 1 is. And then text total, sorry, I screwed up here. This needs to be dot text, because text discount amount is this object, and we want to set the text property of this object. Same thing with text total is this object here, this box, and we want to set the text property of that to format currency invoice total. So we're taking the invoice total and popping it into here. One more step, when the user fills out a value and hits calculate, these are going to populate, and we want the cursor to come back to this field. So they could type in 280, and then hit enter, which, because on this form, if we come over here to properties, this form's accept button is set to button calculate. If they put in 280 and then hit enter, it's like clicking on the calculate button. These fields will populate, and then we want to take subtotal and select it so they can put in another value and quickly run again and again. So we're going to text subtotal dot select. All right, let's save this. So we just did step 3 by typing in that code. And then step 4 is we need to type in the code for the exit button. So look at this. So we have a class for our form invoice total, which is the whole form here. And we have a sub procedure that starts and ends here. And then we end our class. So that's it right now. Right? We have no other sub procedures. When I double click exit, it's going to handle when the user clicks on exit. I double click that and Visual Studio automatically gives me this code. All right. And then we need to add the code to actually close the application if the user clicks on exit. And that's as simple as just saying me.close. So me refers back to this class, and we're going to close, which is the form, and we're going to close the form. So step 4 is one line of code. All right, save that again. Wants us to open the error list window. I already have mine open. If you don't, you can go to View Error List, and then you can have it open there. And then we're going to hit F5 or hit the Start button to start the application. Hopefully we have no errors. I forgot to turn off my antivirus. That's okay. So I'm going to hit 280, hit enter, and that was my antivirus. Let me turn that off for a second. Okay. I always forget to turn off my antivirus when running this. Okay, so I'm going to put in 280, hit enter. Oh, we have an error. What did we do wrong? Conversion of type text box to type currency is not available. Okay. This is because this is the wrong value here. This should say, I'm going to hit stop the application. This should say discount amount. So whatever I had in there before, text discount amount is this box. And I was trying to put this object, I was trying to convert it into a currency, which doesn't work. What you really want to do is, and you want this discount amount, which is a decimal, to be formatted as currency, and then put in there. Okay, everything else looks good. So, even after, I don't know how many years of Visual Basic, programmers screw up. If it's a simple typo or just, me explaining this as I'm writing it is sometimes confusing. It happens. All right, so we're going to run 280. There we go. So does that make sense? 280, is it greater than or equal to 500? No. Is it greater than or equal to 250 and less than 500? Yes, it is. So it's this part of our code. The discount percent is 15. We do some calculations. We set the value of the text discount percent field to 15.0. So that 0.0 comes from the 1 decimal place of precision. And format percent, remember, multiplies it by 100 and add the percent sign. The discount amount, well, 15% of 280 apparently is 42. And then when you subtract it, you get 238. I can put in 300. I can put in 499, and we're still at 15%. I put in 500. Now we have a 20% discount. And that seems to work. Every time I hit enter, it runs. And if I hit escape, it's like clicking on the exit button, and it just ran the me.close. All right, so that was through step 7. All right, step 8 is run it again, and it wants us to put in an invalid figure for subtotal. hit enter, and you'll see the exception gets thrown and the exception assistant comes up. And it says here, note the highlighted statement, read the message that's displayed. So you can see right here, we're trying to take XX and saying, is XX greater than 500? And you know, when I hover over this, you can see the value that gets sent in is XX. So if you have any questions about what to trying to compare to the 500, you can see right here, it's trying to compare XX. Do we have any? All right, it wants us to close this. It should be giving us. All right, I'm not seeing the drop down for the data error. That's okay. So that's getting the exception thrown. And I'm going to make sure my application stopped. Okay. That was basically steps 8, 9, and 10 is just putting in an invalid value and seeing what happens when you throw an exception. Now we need to rename discount percent. You can see a discount percent is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It's used 7 times in the code. If we right click on that, we can rename. And this renaming box comes up here. So the rename box comes up. And when we rename a variable, we can say we wanted to rename the variable inside comments as well. You typically want to, in case you refer to that variable in your comment somewhere. Strings, maybe not. Preview changes, they want you in step 12 to deselect that. And we're going to call this so I'm just going to start typing now. Discount PCT. And now it's telling us it's going to update 7 references in one file. When we get into multiple files and you rename something, Visual Studio will rename it across all files. So there you go. That's how you rename something. Of course, discount PCT is a terrible variable name. We have the room, call it discount percent, not discount PCT. But we're going to leave that right now. Okay, step 13. It wants us to take the else ifs and comment these out. So I selected these lines. If you come up to your toolbar, you will see right next to the save all, you can comment out everything, which also, if you look, the keyboard shortcut for that is Control K, Control C. On the other side, it's uncomment, Control K, Control U. Anyway, I'm going to hit that, and it commented out that code for me. And basically, if the subtotal is greater than or equal to 500, you get a 20% discount. Otherwise, you get no discount. And I want you to run that to see how it works. So if I put in $600, I get a 20% discount. And if I put in $495, I get no discount. All right. That worked just fine. When you're done, select the lines that were commented out and uncomment them to restore them. Okay, those are restored. Step 14, it wants us to click on the minus button in front of button calculate. So let's say that this sub procedure is done and it's taking up a lot of room. Like right now it's not. We have 30 lines of code. But sometimes if you have hundreds or thousands of lines of code, you don't want to look at every sub procedure. We can click on that minus sign, and that collapses down into a single line in the editor. Notice that my line numbers go from 1, 2, up to 26. And I can click on the plus sign to expand that. My line 26 is that blank line there. But there you go. That is step 14. Step 15 is just looking at, if you click on a condition, you can visually see this if, the condition ends here, and then you have the then. There's these else ifs that go with it. There's an else that goes with it, and this end if lines up with this if. Now again, Visual Studio is going to visually line these things up for you, but as you click on any of these things, you might say, what does this else go to? And it'll highlight everything that is related to that condition. That's step 15. Step 16, hold down Control and spin up on your mouse wheel, showing you that you can zoom in. I'll do this often in class to make the text a little bit bigger so you can see what we're talking about. And then you can scroll back out if you need to. If for some reason you have good eyes, you can make it really small. We're not generating a lot of code, so I like to make it a little bit bigger than normal. Okay, that was step 16. Step 17, go to the Solution Explorer. Show all files, which is this guy right here. So yours might look like this. I'm going to click on Show all files to see everything. And double click on the file named form invoice total designer.vb. So here's the file. Double click on that. This is the code that actually builds your form. We briefly looked at this last week, but you can see that text total, we say, hey, the location of this is at 182.125, and the name of it is text total, and it's read only. And all this stuff we set in the visual portion of Visual Studio, the visual designer of Visual Studio, but code was getting written behind the scenes. So it's not magic. Code is actually being created this whole time. Okay, blah, blah, blah. Now we can close this. We're done in here. I don't think we ever code anything in there because we do it all through the designer. All right, we're looking at the help features of Visual Studio. So place the insertion point in the select method in the last statement of the first event handler. Okay, so let's say we don't know what this select method does. If we just click on it, well, first of all, you can hover over it and you can see, oh, it activates the control. But if we want more help on this, while we have this selected, we hit F1, and in our browser, it will open up, tells you everything that you want to know about this. Okay, it takes you right to the help. So maybe the select method isn't really complicated, but format percent, like, gee, what's that second argument to format percent? We can click on it, hit F1, and it takes us to format percent, and we can read all about it. Parameters, the first one is what's to be formatted. The second one is how many places to the right of the decimal are displayed. All right, so that is step 18. Step 19, click the magnifying glass at the top of the window, type quick actions into the text search box. All right, right here. I'm going to type quick actions and then press enter to see what the listed in the center pane. I got to be honest, I've never used this before. This is just showing us some of the things that we can do. Again, some of this is just playing with Visual Studio, getting to understand what's possible with it. Finally, yeah, we're done there. And that's it. So we're going to save this. All right, before we submit this, I've got a problem with this code. And here's what my problem is. In this condition, we say if text subtotal is greater than or equal to 500, then the discount percent is 20%. Otherwise, if it's greater than or equal to 250 and less than 500, then it's 15%. Well, here's the thing. This and less than 500, it doesn't matter because we already know that, we've already tested it up here, that it's, if we got here, we know it's less than 500 because it's not greater than or equal to 500. And this is just taking up, additional, in my mind, brain power. I think this This is not short-circuited. I'd have to remind myself of this. I don't know if we did that in chapter 3. I'd have to review chapter 3 about short circuit conditions. Let me see if I can find it real quick. You can actually hear me flipping through the book. I don't think we've gotten to this yet. No, we'll talk about this later. Anyway, this is not short-circuited, so it's actually going to calculate this amount too. So if we get rid of these, it doesn't change the functionality of our application, right? If I had 600, it's still going to fire here. If I had 300, it's still going to fire here. And if it's 150, it's still going to fire here. And if it's under 100, it's still going to be here. So this is better programming now by getting rid of those unnecessary conditions. And then finally, when we start with discount percent, it's not defined. Like discount percent does not have a value. It's basically null at this point. And then we go through and we set the value. And this, if all these conditions fail, we set the value to 0. A better way to do this would be to set this to 0 to start, and then get rid of this else statement. So now you say the discount percent is 0, and if one of these conditions is met, the discount percent could be increased based on the amount of the subtotal that gets put in. But if we get down here, if we're here and we haven't changed the discount percent, then the value of it is 0. There's no need to put that else statement in there. So this is just a little bit better, I would say, of a way to code this project. And it's going to run exactly the same. All right, so I just saved it. I'm going to review really quickly how you should submit your project. So I'm going to go back to exercise 3. I'm going to go to my projects folder. So you find the projects folder. Do not submit the project. Do not submit the solution. Do not submit just your one VB file. Go to the entire folder, right-click on it, send to compressed zipped folder. Pick that. Now we have a zip folder, and that in exercise 3.1, you're going to browse your computer. You're going to find it. Visual Studio Projects. Here's your zip file. That's what you're submitting. And reminder for my students as well, look at the rubric, make sure that you've done all these things. So do we have the event? We do. Do we have the event for the exit button? We do. And we copied that code. Does it follow readable style recommendations? Yeah, because Visual Studio handles all of that for us. Does the project build? Yes, it does. Does it work with valid data? Yep, we tested that a few times. And did we rename discount percent? I'll give you a hint. A lot of students miss this one point. So make sure you get that done. That's when we right-clicked on discount percent and renamed it. So if you've done all that stuff, you can then go ahead and submit your project, and you're done with 3-1. All right, good luck. Any questions? See me.